Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. I am Rob, your host, and looking forward to a fun show this afternoon. I've got a great guest. We're going to introduce him in just a second, but before we do that, I wanted to take a second to say thank you to all the listeners. We appreciate you guys checking in every week and listening to the episodes that we're putting out. We would ask that if you don't mind, go rate the show wherever you're listening to it on whatever platform. That helps the show a bunch. On Google or Spotify or any of those. Also, check us out on Instagram and Twitter, and we also have a Facebook group. Man, if you're into just getting onto Facebook and sharing things that you're enjoying drinking or cooking and things like that, come join our group. We would love for you to do that. So let's jump into the show. My guest today is John Jackson, a.k.a. the Attorney Somm. And John, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
So I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Obviously, the name, people can kind of get the gist of it, right? Attorney and Somm. And you have a passion for wine in general, but you're really into the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is the collecting and kind of storing and keeping wine.
I am. So as an attorney, I actually started out getting interested in wine and then became a bit of a wine collector and traveled to wine producing regions and so forth and enjoyed that. And then I started taking the WSET certifications to become a better blind taster, since I would do a lot of blind tasting with my friends, and it's always really challenging, and I wanted to improve on that. And so that ultimately led to me just recently receiving my level 4 diploma from the WSET.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And then a couple of years ago, I started Instagram, doing that a little bit, posting some of the wines, and then it kind of grew from there. And now I also do Twitter, and then I do a lot of YouTube videos as well on the Attorney Somm channel, and a lot of those are dedicated to wine collecting. So certainly I collect myself, and that's one of the most common topics for me to produce YouTube videos on.
And you've got quite a following on Instagram. I mean, big following, Twitter as well. And you do your videos not only on YouTube, but they can also find you if they follow you on Instagram. You do some lives there as well.
Yes. So I started out doing a lot of the Instagram lives right when the pandemic hit, and a lot of the wineries were interested in getting the word out and in allowing people to do virtual tastings when they weren't able to visit in person. And so I started doing that, and I've probably done close to 30 of those. And some of those I've put on YouTube as well, but for the most part, the last 6 or 7 months, I'm just keeping those on Instagram, primarily because it takes forever to edit them.
Right. Is it your goal to transition to YouTube, or are you just going to kind of keep doing both platforms?
I don't know that I'll ever transition if you mean quitting one of them.
Right. Not quitting in the sense of not posting, but the video portion of it.
Right. So I've slowed down a bit on the Instagram Live. I've done maybe one every couple months this year, where last year I was doing them more regularly. So I think that's a combination of two things. One, the YouTube videos that I just produce on my own tend to do a lot better. And so I've dedicated more of my time to doing that on YouTube. And then second, with people being able to travel and visit places in person, I think that there's probably not as much demand and not as much interest in terms of the producers doing as many of the Instagram live sessions.
I got you. And the reason I asked the question is I didn't want people, if they follow you on Instagram, to not see the videos and just assume you've stopped. If they've moved over to YouTube, I just wanted to make sure they know, go find you there. If they're being produced at both locations, then they'll see it, but I didn't want them to miss out.
Yeah, there's a video tab, which is, I think, the middle tab on the home page for Instagram for your profile. And I've done a bunch of videos there that people will see. And I even did one last Wednesday with a Virginia winery. So I just did one a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I watched that one last week. That was very interesting. I don't know a lot. And I think you mentioned that I think 70% of the people with the poll you put out have never tried a Virginia wine. And I would be in that category. I didn't know. I know a lot of states, New York, and, you get up into Michigan and some other places produce wine. But I had no idea that the quality and things would be there in Virginia, where they're located on the coast and everything. But I guess it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's another one where it's had some quality improvements, certainly in the last 10 years or so. I know Thomas Jefferson struggled to try to produce wine there a long time ago and wasn't very successful. But I think recently they have made some headway, and definitely the wines that I tasted the other day were very enjoyable.
So I got to ask you a question before we jump into our topic. How do you compare where Virginia wine is compared to where we are, you and I both being in Texas, Texas wines, and where they are in their kind of development?
Yeah, I'll need to do a refresh on Texas wines as well, because it's been probably 10 years since I visited.
Oh, really?
It has been a long
Okay.
time, and I haven't really even tasted them much. I think I've tried maybe one of them since then.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so to do it justice, I'll have to do another trip. But my takeaway at that time was that they had some wines that I enjoyed, but to find one of them that I really liked, I had to spend a lot more money than I would if I would buy something in, say, California or Oregon, because you could spend probably half as much and get something just as good in one of those areas.
Yeah, and well, I'll be interested to see what you if you revisit Texas and kind of get what your opinion is on that region as well. Well, let's jump into our topic today: collecting and storing wines. And I think this is a good topic, John. I appreciate you doing it, because I think there's just this. This is my perception. You can tell me if I'm wrong. A growing boom in wine. I think there's so many more younger people getting into wine at a younger age. I remember growing up and wine was kind of, for somebody 40 or older, or it was something that, you had to have a lot of money to get into, and things like that were, surrounded by wine or with wine. And I think today's world has changed greatly. I mean, wine has become kind of it's a cool thing. I'll say it that way. Everybody thinks it's cool. I don't know if it's all of a sudden, but I've starting to notice that younger and younger people are really into wine.
I think that's true. And I know certainly millennials appreciate the story behind the wine as well. And so I know they're very interested in wines that are produced in an organic and a sustainable manner. And certainly to the extent that producers are able to communicate that, definitely resonates with the younger crowd as well.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into the topic that we're going to talk about, I have 5 questions that as we go through this podcast today, I'm going to throw at you. And these are kind of curveballs, but we know your expertise is wine, but sometimes it's fun to have my guests answer some questions that kind of pulls the veil back a little bit, shows a little bit of their personality, what they like or don't like in their everyday life and things like that. So as we go through that, as we go through the show, be ready for that.
Sounds good.
I would guess that, if you're going to get into collecting or wanting to start collecting wine, you have to put some thought to it. I mean, you can't just all of a sudden just start doing it. I guess you have to kind of have, some kind of goal or something of what you're trying to accomplish. Would that be fair to say?
I think so. I think it's good to know whether or not your objective is to invest and try to turn a profit, or it's for personal enjoyment, some combination of those two. And if it's for personal enjoyment, do you just want a bunch of young release wines from different areas that are going to be available for you depending on what you decide to eat that day? Or do you want to have some specific wines that will increase in price and appreciate and develop complexity and ageability as they age in your cellar? And so I think you need to know whether or not you like young wines or older wines, which types of wines you like, if you like California, if you like Bordeaux, white wines, red wines, those sorts of things. And certainly the question about investment grade versus wine for personal consumption is a big one too, because that will definitely heavily impact what you purchase.
Yeah, I think we're going to focus more on the purse. I want to talk a little bit about the investment, because there may be some people, maybe more than I think, who are interested in that part of it. But I think for our episode, we're going to focus more on if somebody's trying to get into collecting wine for personal consumption and that kind of approach.
Okay.
But first question as we jump into this, John, your favorite 80s movie?
Favorite 80s movie would have to be Scarface.
Oh, really? Okay, that didn't take you long at all. I get a lot of guests that have to think for a minute. I think that's a decade of movies where, there was just a wide variety of types of movies, and I think Scarface is a great one. Haven't heard that one a whole lot, actually.
Yep. No, I enjoyed that one a lot.
Okay, so collecting wines. First thought for most people, I think, would be it has to be expensive in order to, start a collection, you're only going to save wines that are expensive and have that ability to lay down. And so I think they think those two things coincide, right? If they're expensive, they're able to lay down. If they're not, then they can't really lay down for that long. True or not true?
That's false. There's actually plenty of age-worthy wines that aren't necessarily that expensive. Of course, expensive is kind of a relative term, but they don't have to be $100 or more, certainly. There's a number of collectible wines, $25, $30 for sure. Spain and Rioja is a great example of that. You can get lots of outstanding Rioja for $25, $30, and that will definitely age for a number of years.
Well, that's great to know. But also, I think the other thing to mention about Rioja, too, is they hold their wines back a little bit longer, too, don't they, before release?
They do, yeah. So Gran Reservas in particular have extended age on them, and oftentimes by the time they're released, they have substantial age, and even those who enjoy wine with a little bit more age on them don't have to wait, and they could just pop them immediately. But certainly they are capable of further bottle age as well.
Okay. So let's jump into kind of piggybacking on what I just asked you. When we say expensive, what are some price categories? Or let me ask it this way. How do you know if a wine can age? Price doesn't necessarily drive that, right? So how do you know when you look at a wine and a producer what you're paying for it? Because you just mentioned $25 wine can lay down for a while. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear somebody say that. So how do you know what's worthy of being aged and what needs to be drank in the next 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, it does take a little bit of research and education. And that's one of the reasons why on my YouTube channel, I've been focusing on identifying wines at different price points. And so a lot of people were interested in specific recommendations for wines that cost, say, $100. And so I did a video on that. And then they said, well, how about 75? So I did one at 75, and then I did one at 50 and one at 25. And so I tried to pick a group of wines from a variety of regions at all those different price points. But those all contain some examples of things that are collectible and age-worthy, or, some of them I call cellar defenders, and those sometimes will give you some flexibility, like a Rioja we discussed, or a Chateauneuf du Pape is somewhat similar, where oftentimes you can enjoy it immediately on release because that Grenache fruit is nice and fresh, or you can also save it for a while, and you can definitely age it 6, 7, 8 years or more and enjoy it then. So I like to call those cellar defenders because they have the flexibility. They're good enough wines that you can enjoy them immediately, but if you have a craving for a really nice wine on a Wednesday night, you can also open one of those without feeling too bad. And also it will help to save the more expensive wines that definitely do need more age.
Yeah, when I heard you say that term in one of your videos, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was awesome because cellar defender, I think it's just a great term for those types of wines, because I think you mentioned in one of your videos, having those in your cellar prevents you from maybe opening something you really shouldn't yet, on kind of that spur of the moment.
Exactly, yeah. But if you're talking about generalities, if you're talking about white wine, a lot of white wine is designed to be consumed immediately, but certainly wines like Riesling from Germany or Alsace or Austria can age. White Burgundy is capable of aging. Some of the higher end Chardonnays from other places can age for a little bit, but in many instances, white wine is designed to be consumed younger, with those exceptions. And red wine is somewhat similar. There's certainly a lot of wines that are meant for early consumption, but then there are wines that are known for longevity. Certainly there's a lot of Bordeaux that's known for being age-worthy, Burgundy. Definitely some Syrahs can age for a while. Barolo, exactly, Barbaresco.
Yeah.
A lot of times if they have really good acidity and some tannins, like Barolo, Barbaresco, and some of those others we've been discussing, then that helps to support some extended aging.
So here's a question. We're having this conversation for people who are going, okay, I kind of want to get into wine collecting, but I'm not sure how to start. But there also might be that group of people who are going, I drank wine, but I've never thought about collecting wine. So they're listening to the show going, the first question comes to their mind as they get ready to click on this episode is, why would I want to collect wine? What's in it for me? Why would I do this? How would you answer that to somebody?
Sure, there's a couple of benefits. It gives you the ability to be spontaneous if you have even say 50 to 100 bottles in your cellar at home. Say, for example, you want to have, Thai food and you have some Riesling or something that would go well with that, then you can just grab a bottle rather than having to run to the liquor store every single time you want to have some wine with dinner. And if you have a varied collection, the same would be true if you pick, barbecue or if you picked fish or something else. So it gives you flexibility in terms of being spontaneous and having something ready to go. The other thing is sometimes you see appealing offers on wines. And so if you buy a case of a certain wine or 6 bottles of a certain wine, you could get free shipping and a favorable price from a flash site, for example. And so if you buy in quantity, you can oftentimes get better pricing. And so your cost per bottle would essentially be much lower. Another advantage is for those who do like aged wines, you can store those wines and let them age and they'll gain complexity. And then you can taste them as they evolve. But if you wait until they reach their peak or close to it, you can oftentimes enjoy the wine that way and have much less cost into it than what it would cost to buy an aged wine on the secondary market.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So people are going to hear this and go, okay, I'm starting to make the decision that I want to start collecting wine. But they go, man, I've got to build out a cellar, or I've got to invest in some, expensive equipment like a wine fridge. But that's not necessarily the case, right? There's some alternatives to making a space in your home to be able to start your collecting of wine.
There are some off-site storage facilities. And so you can certainly look into getting space at one of those facilities and then maybe have a smaller, even maybe 12 bottles that you keep just at home. But then certainly the off-site storage would allow you to go there, and you have to plan ahead a little bit, but you don't have the same initial cash outlay that you would if you had to invest in some sort of larger at-home solution.
So when you're doing an off-site, do they charge you based on the I'm guessing the square footage or however they that space that you're taking up? Is it bottle count? Is it in a rack, or do you have your own like little space that you have with?
Right. Oftentimes it's by the bottle, by the month. So it can add up. And if you're going to be doing that, probably it would be better for it to be more expensive wine, because it wouldn't make sense to be paying, $1 a month per bottle, for example, on a $20 wine.
Yeah, no.
Pretty soon costs more than the bottle. So.
Well, one thing that when we talk about that and how that can add up when you start talking about, cost per bottle, I would almost think it's better to, if you're looking at going this route, to save up and, maybe take a closet that you have and get some shelving, some wine racks, and put into a darker, cooler closet, start your collection there. Maybe you can get 40, 60 bottles in there, and then start to save that reoccurring expense you would have at an offsite and invest in a refrigerator or something. Because once you make that purchase, you're kind of done with cost until you realize, and we all realize, that I don't have enough. I need to buy another fridge. We all hit that point.
Right. No, I think that's right. And especially if you're just buying wines at the $20, $25 price point, the worst that can happen is one of them might go bad because you don't have climate control. And, even if you have some percentage of flawed wines as a result of the storage conditions not being perfect, that's still a lot less than paying for a solution that's more than what you need at that time.
Yeah. So how important, if you're going to start collecting wine, I'm guessing that, what you like needs to be a big part of that formula of deciding what wines I want to put in my collection. How important is that?
That is important. So I do recommend that people have a pretty good sense for their palate before they start buying heavily, and also to diversify a little bit and not focus exclusively on just one region. This is actually something I learned from experience. I started out by getting really into Napa Napa Valley Cabernet mostly. And so that was the first wine region I visited. And I went there and signed up for a bunch of clubs and mailing lists my first trip, and then got a few recurring shipments. And then they started to accumulate rapidly. And so before I knew it, I was pretty much 100% in Napa Cab, and I had several hundred bottles. And so that's great. But then I also discovered that I liked French wines and Spanish wines and wines from all over the place. And so to this day, I'm probably still disproportionately weighted in California, even though on a percentage basis, I drink it probably, maybe 15, 20% of the time.
So, do you ever find that people who want to collect wine or start the collecting process, are they younger wine drinkers that you see in today's world? I think, back in the day, you probably said you probably drank and explored wine for a while before you actually said, I'm going to start collecting. I kind of get this feeling today that people are a lot quicker to make the decision on going into collecting wines, probably more millennials in that case.
I think so. And it's interesting, though, because studies have shown that millennials are actually willing to spend much more per bottle on an individual bottle. But I think there's also a high percentage of millennials that prefer beverages like, bourbon and whiskey, and also some artisanal craft beers. And so I think there's not as high a percentage of them that are involved in wine, but those who are willing to spend up more than some people that are a little bit older than them.
And the reason I was asking the question, and I mentioned millennials, and it's not specific to them, but I'm wondering if you've been into wine for just a shorter period of time. Obviously we know our palate changes, and we may try things early on in our wine journey and not think we like it, but come back 2-3 years later and revisit some of those wines and go, man, I was missing out. Because I know I've done the same thing on the other end, where I used to drink wines and go, man, I love this, and then 5-6 years later go, what in the world was I drinking that for? So my question would be, do you lean on people who have experience if you're going to collect wines? Let's talk, a vintage comes out, and you're not necessarily into Italian wines, but 2016 is thought to be fantastic, and you can get some good Brunellos in that $35 to $55 range, and your friend's saying you should put some of that in your collection, but right now your palate, you don't drink that. Should you follow that kind of lead, assuming that, one, it's just a good thing to have in the fridge, and two, your palate should change, and in the future you may enjoy those wines?
I think it's not a bad idea to at least have some representation from regions like that. For example, some Barolo Barbaresco from 16, or Brunellos, things of that nature, because at a minimum it could be a nice food pairing someday, and if you have guests over, they may enjoy it. And so I think that's one of the benefits of having a collection, is that you can have at least a few bottles of wines from a number of different regions and a number of different grape varieties and so forth, both red and white and even sparkling. And then that way, depending on what type of cuisine you have or what type of guests you have over and their preference, there's always something that you can select from in the cellar. And certainly if it's a strong vintage, then they're more capable of aging, and they're also probably going to be more enjoyable and better received by a guest, for example.
So let's kind of talk. We've kind of focused on talking more about the red varietals. How about collecting and storing white wines? I mean, you mentioned earlier that usually they drink a lot earlier than when a red would, but we can still collect some white wines.
Definitely. And so Burgundy is a classic example. So it's Chardonnay from the Burgundy region of France, and also Riesling is known to age extremely well, and it tends to have very, very high quality Riesling, or there's very high quality Riesling from places like the Wachau region in Austria. And they have one that's called Schmaragd, Smaragd, that is a little bit more robust, and which can age for quite a while. And in fact, I would recommend aging it before you drink it, because it's really too young to drink when it's on release. And certainly Alsace has some age-worthy white wines. and also Germany. So those are all great sources of white wines that will have the potential to age and improve and gain complexity.
Second question in our 5 questions as we go through the podcast. You ready?
Yes.
As a kid, and kid can go into, your teenage years, your favorite food, and it doesn't have to be a specific food. It could be a meal. It could be, grandma made the best apple pie or chocolate chip cookies. But as a kid, when you think back to those days, your favorite food as a memory of what you enjoyed the most.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's changed to this day, but it would be pizza.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
So is it a specific place you went to pizza or to get pizza, or did you make pizza at home, or how'd that go?
I'm kind of a equal opportunity guy with
share the wealth.
Yeah, there's very few that I haven't enjoyed over the years. So
pizza is one of my favorite things. I got a big brick oven out back, and doing wine nights and pizza nights is one of my favorite things. So when you said that, I'm just starting to go ding, 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 because I love pizza. I make my own dough and sauce. So yeah, pizza is a big thing for me. Favorite wine with a pizza?
There's so many of them. I do enjoy aged Napa Cab with pizza. So after it's got 12 to 15 years on it,
okay,
I really enjoy that. Of course, lots of Italian wines.
Absolutely. You're ready for one? Go ahead.
The Tuscan Reds, certainly a lot of Piedmont wines as well. I've heard Lambrusco is a good pairing with it, but I've never tried that yet. So that's still on my list. But
one of my, sometimes a co-host on the show, Carter, his favorite pairing with pizza is champagne.
That's a great choice too.
So. Yeah, I'd never, up until a few months ago, I was like, okay, I'm not doing it. And he finally brought over a couple bottles and said, we're doing champagne. And I was like, this is pretty good. I'm surprised. I like it a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah. In one time, when the Mavericks were making their run in the championship, maybe 10 years ago or so, at the wine club, we were watching the finals, and someone opened up a bottle of Chateau d'Yquem, 2001 Chateau d'Yquem, and we had that with pizza, and that was really good too.
Yeah, so, I bet it was.
It was great on its own, but the spiciness from the pizza was really offset well by that sweetness, but then there was still so much acidity in it that was a phenomenal combination.
So was there a wine for you, John, that was that aha moment that said, okay, I'm going deeper into wine? And if there is, do you remember what it was?
Sure. It was actually an Opus One, a Napa Cabernet. And so this would have been around 2007 or so. I was at a business dinner with one of my colleagues, and he had just come from Napa. And then we were at the restaurant, and he was in charge of ordering the wines. That was before I knew anything about wine. And so he ended up ordering this bottle that he had when he was there. And it just blew my mind once I tried that. I had never had anything like that at all. And I had no idea wine could be like that. And it would also pair so well with food, and just everything would kind of have a synergistic effect and be even better than it was on their own.
Yeah.
So just a really, really amazing experience. And then I planned my own trip to Napa and was there 6 months later.
Wow. Okay. And fell in love, I guess.
I did. Yeah. Kind of all progressed from there.
I mean, you kind of mentioned that when you talked about how you started your collection, it was pretty Napa heavy.
It was. Yeah. And so, that was definitely my first love in terms of wine, for sure.
So that gets me to ask the question, is there, take Napa for the States, but is there better regions to buy wines, one for value to quality, for aging, for collecting? Because Napa, to me, a lot of the wines are, one, I think, expensive, and I understand the reasons why the price is what it is. But I also wonder, at that price point, you might think, well, I can age this. It's a $50 wine, and it may not, it may age 5 to 7 years, but it may not be great for 15 to 20 years. So how do you kind of grade the different regions of, if you're going to start collecting and want to build up, where you should spend your money? Where's the best value?
Yeah, certainly in terms of value, I think Spain is an incredible source of value with Rioja again. that is a phenomenal place for value. And if people like Pinot Noir, I think they would enjoy Rioja. It's about the same in terms of body body style. It's going to be a little bit more elegant and lighter than some of the heavier wines, and it's very, very food friendly as well. And so that would be a great choice. Certainly, Chateauneuf du Pape has compelling value at prices that are somewhat reasonable. And again, you'll have the option to either open it young or open it later. So that's a great choice. And even Bordeaux.
Yeah, I was going to say Northern Rhone too, right?
Northern Rhone, you have to break it down a little bit. Saint Joseph, certainly some excellent wines at affordable prices. Crozes Hermitage has more affordable wines as well. If you start getting into Hermitage or Côte Rôtie, the price point goes up a little bit, but those are still excellent wines, and relative to the prices you'd pay for Napa, you can still get a lot of wine for your money there as well.
And then
but even Bordeaux relative to Napa, I did a video that was all about $50 Bordeaux, and I didn't have any trouble coming up with 10 names that were really excellent wines at $50 that you could enjoy probably in 5 years.
So let me, I'm going to put you on the spot here, John. That $50 Bordeaux, that list of 10, if you had to say what somebody, just so they can kind of have an idea, what they would pay for that same type of quality wine out of Napa would be about $7,500 bottle?
I think that's fair. There's a $75 bottle video that I did, and I had a name from Napa on there, Chapelet. And so that one would compare favorably, I think, to some of those $50 Bordeaux.
So as we talk about, dollars and what it costs per bottle, that makes me ask the question, when you get into collecting and storing wines, aging wines, you really need to have a budget. You need to figure out what your budget is now. And obviously, over years, depending on your age and where you are in life, your budget can change. But knowing where you are and what you want to spend to kind of get into collecting is very important.
It is. Yeah, you definitely don't want it to interfere with your other priorities or have it cause problems with your spouse, those sorts of things.
You're saying you should still pay rent or pay your mortgage is what you're saying. That's important
exactly,
too.
Yeah. Some people get the bug and it's really hard, and they are almost more excited about the chase than drinking the wine sometimes. So,
well, the next follow-up question would be easy. If you have a lot of money, you can do whatever you want. But the tougher part of that question would be, what's a kind of the floor for being able to get in? What would you say, you need to be able to spend $100 a month, $200 a month to buy a few bottles a month? I mean, what would be that number so people can understand what that might be?
Yeah, I would think if you had $100 a month and you could buy, 2-3 bottles a month, they may not accumulate at that, depending on how many bottles a month you drink. But certainly if you're talking about devoting an extra $100 a month to wines to put away so that they could accumulate a little bit, then certainly by the end of the year, you could easily have, 35, 40 bottles.
Yeah. How do you
do that 2 or 3 years and you've got 100?
Yeah, exactly. And then as your budget changes, you can adjust accordingly. If you get that big promotion at work or something, or a big bonus, and you want to say, I'm going to take 500 and go buy a few bottles or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I don't know how you are, but I know some guys, wine's their hobby. They'll tell me I don't have a boat. Instead of a boat or golfing every weekend when I'm paying $100, $150 for a round of golf, that's my wine fund. I get to spend the money there. So it's also smart to kind of, if this is going to be your hobby, you don't have other things, you might be able to allocate a few more dollars than if you're adding this to a long list of hobbies that you have.
That's very true for sure. So yeah, I've been able to afford a lot of wine by not golfing.
There you go. So what's your recommendation, or do you have one? Because once you start to get a collection of wine, kind of trying to remember what you have can be difficult. I mean, I know there's times I'll go through some fridges and go, I forgot I had this in here. And there's got to be something out there or something that you use that you might recommend, I'm guessing, not just a spreadsheet that helps you kind of manage your inventory.
There is. There's some online solutions now, and I've used Seller Tracker, which is sellertracker.com. I've used that for a long time. They have the ability to scan by QR code now, and that helps to speed up the process a little bit.
Do most wines have a QR code now?
I think a lot of them do.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so that helps to reduce the manual investment in terms of typing everything in, and it makes it go a lot faster. And then there's mobile applications that work with it as well. So if at the club and I pull something there, I try to remember to remove it before I get home. Otherwise, I sometimes forget.
So that makes me ask the question too, is Seller Tracker also something you can use to, if you're at the store and you're going, man, this might be a good wine, maybe I should buy 3 or 6 of these. Can you pull it up and does it tell you if it's, age worthy and things like that? A little bit more information about the wine as well, so you can know if you need to buy more or not.
It does. That one's been around a long time, and a lot of the users, before there was Instagram and before there were all these other social media platforms, they would type notes, tasting notes for the wines into that platform. And so as a result, whenever you look up a wine, you can oftentimes see tasting notes, both from professionals and also from amateurs who have had the wines and share their experience there. And the other thing that it does is it gives a default recommended drinking window. So it would tell you, for this particular bottle, the ideal drinking window would be between 2023 and 2029, for example. And then you would know that sometime within that range would be most likely a reasonable starting point to consider drinking it.
So here's a question on that statement you just made, the drinking window. Does that mean the wine is done changing and you can drink it within this window and it's not changing anymore? Or is it the front of that window, it's where it's approachable and you can drink it, to the end of that window where it's still evolving in the bottle, but once you get past that point, it can still sit in your cellar, but it may not be evolving anymore. Is that the way to understand that?
I believe so. I think I generally don't necessarily agree with the windows, but perhaps it's due to that, what you just described at the end there, where it could keep maybe holding, I guess is a good word. It will hold at that level for a long time. And so you don't need to worry about drinking it by then, but it's just not going to keep gaining complexity and
right
improving after that time.
Because when you start collecting, you want to have that, I guess it's the law of diminishing returns. When you hit that and you're not getting any more return for holding it, then I can start drinking these. It's not going to change anymore. It'll sit in my cellar. It'll be fine until it reaches a certain point, but there's no reason to think that this is going to get any better in the bottle. Let me enjoy it with friends. And it makes room for more bottles to be put in.
That's true. And eventually each person will learn their own preference for drinking windows, and it could vary by wine, but until you learn what you like individually, that's not a bad way to go to see what that default window is.
Yeah. Okay, next question in our list of questions for you, John. Best decade for music, 70s, 80s, or 90s? I'm getting a longer pause here. I like this.
Yeah. It's funny because it keeps changing. At the time I was in the 90s, I liked the 70s.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
And now I'm kind of liking the 80s, some of it. But
okay.
I would say 90s.
90s would be your favorite. Were you a grunge guy?
I was, yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When we talk about getting good wines in your house, what are some pieces of equipment that you think somebody should have? So if they want to taste something, open something, have that wine and enjoy it the right way. Decanters, are they important? Glassware, how important is it for proper glassware? Having a device like a Corvin, is that important?
Yeah, so I think to some extent it varies by person. I'll start with the Corvin. I do have one. I ended up getting one as a sample, and that's the first time that I had it. And I may still not have one if I didn't receive it that way, because my biggest problem is storage space. And so the last thing I wanted was a bunch of partially consumed bottles that were taking up space.
Right.
And also, I'm not sure that I trust it for the long term. And I've had results where, 2 to 3 months later, I didn't enjoy the wine as much and thought it was kind of oxidized. And then I've had other situations where it's lasted 4 or 5 months. But because of that, I tend to use it only on really robust red wines. And then I try to drink the wines probably within 2 to 3 months if I can.
Okay.
And so it's also not cheap. And so certainly if someone is just starting out, I think that's probably something they can wait on.
I agree. How about decanting? I mean, to me, I think a lot of people think older wines need to be decanted and younger wines you can just pour and drink. I kind of think it might be the opposite a little bit.
Yeah, I think terminology is important because people sometimes use decanting and aeration interchangeably. At a restaurant, if you're talking about decanting, you're talking about removing sediment from the wine, and that's important with an older wine. So you definitely want to make sure that if it's an older wine, you don't just pour it all out so that there's all the sediment in your glass. And so you could decant it for that reason. But aeration, you're right, is definitely something that's very important for younger wines, especially Italian wines. And an example of that is if I go to an Italian restaurant, the first thing I'll do right after I get the ice water is I'll order both the white wine to start the meal and a red wine. And I'll make sure they put the red wine in the decanter as soon as they can possibly do it, because that wine will need probably at least an hour of air to soften up a little bit.
Okay, and then glassware. Do you have because you see so many different, people will go, this is a Burgundy glass, this is a cab glass, whatever. Does that have a big impact? Do people need to, put in their cabinet all these different wine glasses, or is there a particular wine shape that you like that you think is somewhat universal?
Yeah, I think, universal is the key. There's oftentimes these universal glasses that people could get that are reasonably good for all wines. That may not be perfect for any one, but it's reasonably good for all of them. And that even includes champagne. And I'm a big proponent of no flutes for champagne. And so I could get by with a universal glass, like a universal Zalto, for example, and I could drink pretty much anything in that and be happy with it.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Should you taste wines before you want to buy a certain number of bottles, of that wine? And when you get into higher wines, is it harder to taste those wines? I mean, my thought is I would want to taste it before I have it, but a lot of restaurants on a nicer wine, they don't sell it by the glass. They typically only sell it by the bottle. But would it be your recommendation, just go ahead and go have a nice dinner and buy that bottle?
If you're talking about a restaurant, I think what I would do is if there's another bottle that you enjoy and you like, you can tell the sommelier that these are some examples of wines that I really enjoy, and then rely on them to make a recommendation for something that should extrapolate.
Okay. And if it's not a restaurant and you're going to taste somewhere, or I kind of got that you might be implying, make friends with people who like wine and might have dinners where you can contribute something, but they might be opening something that's going to kind of expand what you've been exposed to, so to speak. Is that kind of what you're saying as well?
It is. Yeah, I'm a big fan of tasting groups. And so in Dallas, we have a wine club that's sort of like a country club for wine drinkers. And there's storage there as well. And but we could show up on any night pretty much and just bring a bottle of wine with us. And then the other members will do the same. And then we're very good about sharing. So if you bring one bottle of wine, you might try 7 or 8 things that night.
Okay. And let me ask you this. If you're going to start collecting wine, and there's a wine that you really enjoy, how do I know, man, I really like this? Should I only buy 3? Should I buy 6? Should I buy 12? I mean, how do you control that and make sure that, so I feel like if you start buying 12 of too many things, you're really going to kind of do yourself a bit of a disservice. Would that be true?
I think so, because especially as you get more and more bottles, like I can't even remember the last time I had more than 6 of one wine in a particular year. And even 3 or 4 in one year is something I'd kind of have to force if for some reason I just stumbled across it and it was towards the end of its drinking window or its life expectancy, then I might go on a bit of a tear with it to make sure I could finish them in time. But otherwise, I think 3 or 6 is probably the way to go.
Okay. And on that number, tell people your thoughts on, when you get a wine, it doesn't mean that you can't drink it early on. I think it's sometimes fun to open a bottle, see where it's at that particular stage, take some good notes, and then a couple of years later, open it again, and so on. Do you kind of agree with that approach?
I do, depending on what it is, but certainly with something like Chateauneuf du Pape, that's one where I almost always do that. I'll open up one within the first 6 months or so and see how it is on release. And then I'll definitely let some age as well. And then, I might open one in 6 or 7 years. I might open one in 10 years, but it'll just kind of be left to chance after that. But I definitely do think it's a good idea, especially when you're first starting out, to try them at different stages in their development, because you might be surprised. You might like Chateauneuf when it's younger, but you might like Bordeaux when it's older, or vice versa.
Sure.
It really is just subjective. And so the more you taste, the more you learn about your likes and preferences.
So as an avid wine guy and collecting, tasting the same bottle as it continues to change is always fun. But I also think it's fun to take a producer that you enjoy their wine, a particular bottle, and try a vertical of it, 3-4 different years of that particular offering, and seeing how the offerings were different from each year. Do you like to do that as well? And do you suggest that for people to do that as a wine collector?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do different types of tastings. So that would be a vertical like you described. And sometimes we'll have a specific theme where we have a bunch of people who enjoy Pichon Lalande, for example, and we'll each bring a different vintage of Pichon Lalande and then sit down and taste through those and kind of compare them. So that way you can definitely see how they evolve with age, even though you're experiencing them all at the same time and side by side. Because if you just have one bottle in isolation and then 6 months later you have another bottle in isolation, it's really hard to remember what it was like. But if you compare them all side by side, that's when you really can drill down and learn what you like best.
Yeah, and I always think it's fun because I think some people who are new into wine think that, it's not like beer. It's not going to be so consistent. Every time you open a Budweiser, it's pretty much the same thing. Wine's not that way. It's really year to year. The vintage is going to be different based on weather and all those different types of things that go into making that wine. And that's what makes wine fun for me, is to every year be able to see what's this expression this year like of this same wine I enjoy.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So especially in places where the weather is a little bit more variable, you can get a lot of different variations from year to year.
How do you suggest to somebody to build their cellar if they say, okay, my budget is, let's just for simple math say $200 a month, and my sweet spot where I think I'm enjoying wine is, say, that $25 to $35 range. What percentage of their budget, or is there one, should be in that range? What percentage should be maybe into the $15 to $20 range? And what should maybe be in that, $35 to $50 range? Should you splurge on a nicer bottle once in a while of something you like in that $25 to $35 range?
Yeah, I think that would kind of vary by the individual, but it would depend on what they're trying to accomplish. If they like to open a bottle every single day, then maybe they'd probably want to err on the side of getting more bottles at the lower price point.
Is that frowned upon, John? Is that frowned upon? Opening a bottle every day?
I don't pass judgment either way, so I don't.
I was waiting for you to say hell no. I do it all the time.
Yeah, I do take days off, but
Yeah.
I certainly don't throw stones at people who don't.
Sure.
So,
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, so I think it just depends on the person, but if they like to open something every day, then they'll probably run out if they, just focus on the higher end. But
Okay. I just didn't know in building your collection, because if you have a budget of a month, I thought there might be kind of you want to at least go above what your norm is once in a while. Splurge for a bottle that you're going to put away, a little nicer bottle. I didn't know if that was something you thought that you do or other people that you thought people getting into collecting should do?
Yeah. The budget is one of the things that I've had a problem with as well. So I don't,
All of
people,
us, right? All of us.
yeah, they might want to learn from what I say and not from what I actually do on that part. But
Well, you
yeah, I
can.
think it's definitely helpful to have some higher end wines as well. And that way for special occasions, birthdays, or if they just had a really bad Monday and want to open something that night,
There you
then
go.
they can go a little heavier.
That makes me ask a question. Do you have a rule for drinking good wines? Does it have to be on a weekend? Does it have to be with other people? My wife has a rule that drink it when you want it. If we want to open a nice bottle on a Tuesday night, open it up and let's drink it. Is that kind of your rule, or do you kind of have some parameters there?
No, that's my rule as well. I like how she thinks.
Yeah. Okay, the next question in our questions for you. What is your favorite sitcom of all time?
I really enjoyed Frasier. I thought that was a
Okay.
good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's especially fun to go back now and watch some of the episodes because now I understand the wines that they were joking about and talking about in the show.
Oh, I bet.
Where at the
Absolutely.
time it just seemed kind of humorous because they were pompous, but now I actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. um, Let me ask you, if depending on where you are in your age, in your age in life, how old you are, your approach to starting to collect and building a cellar might be a little different. Can you talk than somebody who's younger? Can you talk about kind of what that would be, and then tie that into being able to get wines maybe in the secondary market or where they might be able to find wines that might have some age on them already?
Sure. An excellent example of that would be Barolo, for example. Like Barolo, when its first release, is very, very tannic, and it definitely needs some food at best at that point, but it really gains a lot of complexity and becomes a much different wine with age. But it could sometimes take 20, 25, 30 years or more to reach its peak, depending on the particular producer. And so if your time horizon for drinking is somewhat less than that, then you may want to look into purchasing the wine on the secondary market rather than buying new release, because you may be able to find some wine from the early 2000s, for example, or the late 90s at a slight premium that are more ready to enjoy now rather than having to wait 2 decades before they reach their potential.
Okay, and my last question for you, John, in our 5 questions. This is your, we all have a nightcap, right? Whether it's a whiskey or a glass of wine or whatever it might be. This is your final nightcap. You're going up to sing with the angels. It's over here on earth. Your final bottle or your final pour would be what? I mean, it could be something that you've had and you absolutely love, think it's tremendous and you want it again. Or it could be something that, you just haven't been able to get your hands on and it's something you would want to try before you go up north.
Yeah, so I have had Chateau d'Yquem, but I haven't had like 1928. So that would be...
That would be the unicorn bottle.
I think so, yeah. So something with substantial age. That one's known for aging for 100 years or more. And so just something super, super old from a top vintage of Chateau d'Yquem.
So we've talked about red wines. We've talked about white wines. Let's talk about 2 more areas of wine, and then we'll close this out. One being dessert wines like Sauternes and things like that, and one being port. Where do you fall on those?
I pretty much enjoy all of them, or there's some examples of everything that I enjoy. And so I've been to Porto and tasted there. I really enjoyed it. And I also enjoy Sauterne. So there's also some great food pairings with Sauterne. In France, they oftentimes have it with cheese at the end of a meal. It works great with that. Also with foie gras, if you're a foie gras fan, it's a tremendous pairing with foie gras.
Is this something that a collector, if they enjoy drinking these, should it be something that they need to keep a few bottles in their collection?
I would recommend it. The great thing about it is that pretty much all of that wine is very out of favor right now.
Oh, really?
So for the quality, you can actually do quite well in terms of what you buy. And so it's definitely something I recommend. The other thing I like is for Sauterne, you can get half bottles quite often, and you really don't need very much. And so even a half bottle, you could pour a little pour for even a dinner party of 8 people or more, and that would be plenty to go around.
Yeah. Okay. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on. Tell the people one more time where they can find you and come check out all your content.
Sure, exactly. On YouTube, it's exactly like it appears on the screen there, Attorney Somm, 2 words with a space in between. And then on Instagram and Twitter, you just remove the space. So it's Attorney Somm altogether.
All right. Well, John, thanks for coming on. This has been a great conversation. I obviously, like I do on most of my shows, I learned a little something. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.